G'day. I'm not one for writing letters, let alone sharing something like this, so please make style adjustments as you require. Look, what I've been through has been weighing on me. I reckon it's time to get it off my chest. Just call me Jack, though it's not my real name. I live out in the Wheatbelt region of Western Australia. Not much out here except for miles of open farmland and the odd kangaroo. I've been a wheat and sheep farmer all my life, just like my dad before me. It's a tough way to make a living, but it's honest work, and it keeps me close to the land, which is where I've always felt most at home. Life's simple out here. I get up before the sun, check on the sheep, make sure the crops are coming along, and fix whatever needs fixing. It's a peaceful sort of life, really, the kind that a lot of blokes in the city dream of, though they wouldn't last a week out here. It can get a bit lonely at times, just me, the dog, and the wide open sky, but I've always been content with that. Never been one for crowds anyway. But something happened a few months back, something that's been gnawing at me ever since, and no matter how much I try to focus on the farm, I can't shake it. Things haven't been the same since that night. It was a normal evening, just after sundown. I was out checking on the sheep before calling it a night. We'd had a few foxes around lately, and I wanted to make sure the flock was safe. The sky was clear, stars scattered everywhere like they always are out here. But then, something caught my eye, some strange lights off in the distance. At first, I thought nothing of it. Could have been a plane or maybe a weather balloon. We get the odd aircraft flying over, though not often. The lights were moving slowly, almost like they were drifting. Didn't think too much of it then, just went back to finishing up. But the next night, there they were again. Same spot, same strange, slow movement. I stood there for a while, watching, trying to make sense of it. Couldn't hear anything. No engine noise, no hum, just those lights glowing in the distance. I figured it had to be something explainable, so I brushed it off, went back inside, and thought nothing more of it. But they kept coming back. Each night those lights were there, and each time they seemed a bit closer. I couldn't help but watch them, wondering what they were. After a few nights, it started to get under my skin. I'd heard stories from other farmers about strange things happening out here, but I always thought it was just talk. Bored men making up tales after a few too many beers, but now I wasn't so sure. I'll never forget that night. The lights had been coming and going for a few weeks by then, and I was almost getting used to seeing them, like they were becoming part of life out here. But this night was different. I was out later than usual, checking on the sheep again, when I noticed the lights, only this time they were real close, hovering right above the far side of the paddock. I stood there, staring, trying to make sense of it, when suddenly the lights dimmed, like they'd been swallowed by the darkness. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought I was seeing things. Right in the middle of my field was a figure, a woman, but not like any woman I'd ever laid eyes on. She had to be nearly 7 feet tall, with a figure that was just, well, perfect. She was wearing this tight, dark blue bodysuit that hugged her body, and her long, blonde hair flowed down her back, almost glowing in the moonlight. But it was her eyes that really got me, piercing blue, like they could see right through you. She didn't say a word, didn't move, just stood there, looking at me. But the thing is, I wasn't scared. I should have been, standing there in the dark with this tall, strange person staring me down. But I wasn't. There was something about her, something calming. It was like all the stress, the worries of the farm, just melted away in her presence. I couldn't stop looking at her. That tight bodysuit shimmered slightly in the moonlight. She looked like she'd stepped straight out of another world. And then I saw it. The craft. It was sitting just behind her, hovering silently above the ground. It was a smooth metallic disc. It must have been about 40 or 50 feet across. It was obviously not from this world, because I have never seen a plane like that. There were no wings or engines or anything. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at each other. Time seemed to slow down, or maybe it stopped altogether. She never spoke, but somehow I could feel what she wanted to say. It wasn't words exactly, but feelings, emotions, a deep sense of calm, curiosity, and something else. A kind of connection, like she knew me, like we were meant to meet. I should have been terrified. I should have run, or at least grabbed my rifle, but I couldn't. There was something about her that made me feel safe, like nothing bad could happen as long as she was there. And so, I just stood there, rooted to the spot, waiting for whatever was going to happen next. After that first night, I didn't think I'd see her again. It felt like some strange dream, one I couldn't explain but couldn't forget either. But a few nights later, she came back. Same spot, same quiet calm about her. This time, I wasn't as shocked, though I still couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. I stood there, waiting, and that's when it started. The feeling, the connection. It wasn't like talking, not in the way we humans do. I could hear her in my mind, clear as day, even though her lips never moved. She didn't need to speak. Her thoughts and emotions flowed straight into me. At first it was overwhelming, like being hit with a wave of information all at once. But soon, I started to make sense of it. She was from a star system far beyond anything I'd ever imagined, a place I couldn't even begin to comprehend. She told me about her people, how they've been visiting Earth for centuries. Just watching, learning, said they weren't here to cause trouble, just trying to understand us. And for some reason, she picked me. Never said why, but I could feel it. That connection between us growing stronger each time she came back. As the weeks passed, her visits became more frequent. Sometimes, we'd just stand there together, under the stars, barely saying a word. We didn't need to. It was like just being close to her filled me up, like we were connected in a way I couldn't quite wrap my head around. Then one night, things took a turn. She invited me onto her craft. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. The walls were smooth, almost alive, with soft lights that seemed to pulse with energy. Everything was quiet, but there was a hum in the air, like the ship itself was breathing. It wasn't cold or sterile, though. It felt strangely comfortable, like stepping into a space built just for us. That night, inside her ship, she got even closer to me. I won't get into all the details. The way we connected, physically and emotionally, was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It was intense, exhilarating, like being part of something much bigger than just the two of us. And yet, there was a gentleness to it, something that made me feel alive in ways I hadn't before. Every moment with her was powerful, like we were merging together, not just bodies, but minds, souls. It left me breathless, and I knew I was in deep, far deeper than I'd ever been with anyone. But as much as I craved those moments, I struggled to make sense of it all. How could a bloke like me, a Wheatbelt farmer, end up here, inside an alien ship, with someone from another world? The more I thought about it, the more confused I got. It didn't make sense, none of it. But when I was with her, none of that mattered. It all felt too right to question. Still, when she left, I'd be alone again, staring up at the stars, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. It was like waking from a dream, unsure if any of it was real, but feeling in my bones that it was. It wasn't long before I started to feel like I was living in two different worlds. There was the life I'd always known, the farm, the routine, the familiar faces in town, and then there was her, this strange otherworldly connection that had become part of my nights. The more time I spent with her, the more the lines between those two worlds began to blur. During the day, I'd try to keep things normal. I'd get up, tend to the sheep, fix the fences, and head into town for supplies like I always did. But something was off, and I knew people were starting to notice. Old mates at the pub would ask why I seemed distracted, why I wasn't my usual self. I'd brush it off, say I was just tired from the farm work or that I'd been having trouble sleeping. But the truth was, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. At night, when she came, everything felt right, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But when she was gone, I felt lost. I'd sit there, staring out at the stars, wondering if I was losing my mind. I mean, how could I explain this to anyone? A bloke like me, having a relationship, if you could call it that, with an alien. It sounded ridiculous even to me, and I was the one living it. I couldn't tell anyone, not my family, not the few mates I had left. How could I? They'd think I was mad, and maybe I was. I started keeping to myself more, avoiding conversations, avoiding people. Whenever I did see them, I could feel their eyes on me, like they knew something was up, but couldn't quite put their finger on it. I'd shrug off their questions with half-hearted excuses, but I knew they didn't believe me. Hell, I barely believed myself. Some nights, after she'd gone, I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. Was this real? Or had I gone completely off the rails? I'd think about the way she made me feel, how calm, how connected we were, And then I'd think about the fact that she wasn't even human. It didn't add up, and yet somehow it did. It felt more real than anything I'd ever known. But that didn't stop the doubts from creeping in. I'd catch myself staring off into space, wondering if any of it was true or if I'd just gone mad from being out here alone for too long. My family, when they'd visit, noticed something was different. They'd ask if I was all right, and I'd tell them I was fine, just busy with the farm. But they weren't convinced, and neither was I. I felt torn between two worlds, the real one I'd known my whole life, and this strange, unexplainable one that had come into my nights. I didn't know which one I belonged to anymore. One night, after weeks of her visits, something changed. Usually, we'd just stand there in the field, or sometimes she'd lead me closer to her craft, and we'd share that strange, silent connection. But this time, it was different. I could feel it the moment she arrived. There was an urgency in the air, a tension I hadn't felt before. She didn't waste any time. The connection between us sparked up almost instantly, and I started getting these flashes of images, like memories, but they weren't mine. I saw Earth, but not as it is now. I saw cities, landscapes, entire continents devastated, like something out of a nightmare. Then, I saw her world, her people, how they had been watching us for longer than I could fathom. Through the images, she showed me that her people, her race, had been observing humanity for centuries. They weren't here to interfere, but they had been keeping tabs on us, watching as we grew, advanced, and inevitably, as we made the same mistakes they once did. She explained, in that wordless way of hers, that the path we were on was dangerous, more dangerous than most of us could imagine. And the greatest threat was something we'd created ourselves: nuclear war. Her people had seen it happen before, on other worlds. Civilizations that reached a certain point, that harnessed the power of the atom and then turned it against themselves. They watched as those worlds tore themselves apart, and they feared the same would happen here, on Earth. She told me that her people weren't the only ones out there, and that Earth wasn't the only place they watched. But something about our planet, about humanity, had caught their attention. There was a potential here, a chance to avoid the fate others had faced. That's why they had made contact with certain humans over the years. People they believed could handle the truth, people who could spread the warning. She warned me that we were closer to the brink than most of us realized. The threat of nuclear war was growing, even if we couldn't see it yet. She didn't spell out the details, but I could feel the weight of it, the danger that loomed over us all, and she made it clear that their purpose wasn't to save us. They couldn't do that. We had to save ourselves. The more she showed me, the more I understood why she had come to me, why she'd chosen someone like me, a simple farmer in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't because I was special or different, but because I was grounded in a world that was real, untainted by the chaos and corruption that seemed to be pulling everything apart. Maybe she thought I'd see things clearly, or maybe I was just another voice to add to the warnings that had already been given. But whatever the reason, the message was clear. If we didn't change our path, we were heading for destruction. And once it started, there'd be no stopping it. I knew it couldn't last forever, but when the time came, it hit me harder than I ever thought it would. One night, as we stood together in that familiar spot, something was different. I could feel it in the way she looked at me, the way her presence seemed heavier, like it carried a weight I wasn't ready to bear. Without words, she let me know. This was her last visit, at least for a while. She had to leave. I don't know where, and she didn't say when she'd be back. All I could feel was this deep sense of farewell, and it cut through me in a way I wasn't prepared for. She didn't need to explain why. I already knew. Her mission here was finished, at least for now, and there were other things, other places she had to attend to. She promised to return, though she didn't say when. It could be weeks, months, maybe even years. That uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving me with more questions than answers. Would I ever see her again? Or was this it? Just one strange chapter in a life that would go back to normal? When she left, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that fills your ears after a storm passes. I watched her walk back toward her craft, that familiar glow surrounding her. It lifted off the ground without a sound, slowly rising into the night sky. And then, just like that, she was gone. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty sky, waiting for a sign, anything that might tell me this wasn't the end. but there was nothing. Just the stars, as silent as ever. Now, I'm left here wondering what comes next. Part of me hopes she'll return, that I'll see that soft glow in the sky again one night. But another part of me knows that this kind of thing doesn't follow our rules. There's no way of knowing if or when she'll be back. In the meantime, all I'm left with is this feeling, this sense of longing that I can't shake. I go about my days, working the farm, tending to the sheep, fixing what needs fixing. But in the back of my mind, she's always there. Every time I look up at the night sky, I wonder if she's watching, if she's somewhere out there, thinking about me the way I'm thinking about her. I suppose life has to go on, even when you've had a glimpse of something far beyond what most people will ever know. But it's hard. It's hard to go back to the way things were when you've seen the stars up close and felt a connection that defies explanation. I just don't know if I'll ever be the same. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, about her and everything she showed me. It's changed the way I see the world, the universe, even myself. I used to think the farm, the land, was all there was. Now I know there's so much more, things we can't even begin to understand. I haven't told anyone, not really. Who would believe me? A farmer, talking about aliens and warnings of nuclear war? They'd say I'd lost it, and maybe I have, in a way, but part of me feels like I can't keep this to myself. The truth, as strange as it is, might be the one thing that helps us in the end. But then again, maybe some things are better left unsaid. Cheers. Jack. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you've had your own eerie encounter, let us know. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.